Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Shared Services and Outsourcing Week North America digital event for 2020. Lots of interesting changes for you this year. First of all, my name is Rochelle Hood. I have the pleasure of serving as SSON's Global Head of Customer Analytics and Research, but this week I have the distinct honor of serving as your chairwoman for the entire week. I'm going to walk you through a quick overview of the conference, and then we'll go ahead and get into the kickoff session. First of all, I would like to let you know that we hope you're all safe and well from this crazy time of interesting events. But one thing that has brought to us is a real big need for increased amount of things available in a digital format. So with that, we added sessions and we added an extra day to this event based on your feedback, and all of you writing us in saying, I really, really need to still get all of my business cases done, all of the work moving forward, and so I need an opportunity to be able to collaborate and still do them. So we've added those things in addition to a lot of additional resources this week to hope that the digital format will provide you with those resources. So that means we now have 21 sessions for you this week. We hope that you join every one of them live, but in the event that you don't get to join them live, at the end of the week you're going to receive a link with a recording to all of the sessions. And that also will give you an opportunity to get in and see, get all those items from the digital gift bags to download for business cases, team meetings, professional development, and so much more. That's one other great benefit about the digital delivery is that you have things to take with you to actually put in place. We really want this to be a resource delivery opportunity for you. Also, thanks to those of you to being so energetic, we have now reached over 800 registrants for this event. So that really shows the interest in this topic and the power of this community coming together to collaborate and move the Shared Services Week, Shared Services agenda forward. You don't need to get on an airplane. You can still socially distance and get some great networking done. In all of the sessions, you're going to see a Meet the Speakers section. Underneath that section where we have the photos and bio information of the speakers, do note that there are social buttons that you can activate, and take consideration to that same kind of thing that you would do with exchanging business cards. Do it digitally. Click on those LinkedIn buttons, click on those emails and other contact points, and be sure to start building your network now. Speaking of the digital gift bag items, nearly every session will have multiple items. You can access those during the session, or when you receive the link to the recording, you can download them then. But please do take an opportunity to save them, reference them. You'll find them quite useful as you're putting your projects together and moving a lot of your initiatives forward. We hope that you'll continue to engage with us also on social media. We'll be doing tweets, live tweets, and LinkedIn posts, so follow along, make your comments, and continue that discussion. In a lot of our surveys and so much of the feedback we heard from all of you, you did mention that you have a lot of need to figure out what this whole crisis means, how you're going to come out of it, what's the effect have been, what are others doing to survive. So I did want to mention that we also, one of the adjustments to the agenda is that we have 6 sessions dedicated specifically to COVID crisis, business continuity planning, and post-planning for emerging out of that. And you'll find that in addition to those 6 dedicated sessions, many of the other sessions will be talking about the impact that that particular process has as well. And then lastly, I wanted to mention to you, if you do miss any of the sessions and you want to get some of the great highlights and takeaways, I'll be delivering my chairwoman summary on Friday, the closing day of the event, at 11:45 U.S. Eastern Time, so you can connect in then. I'll give a 15-minute overview of the entire week, some of the key takeaways, and sort of some of the next steps as it goes from there. So with that out of the way, let's get into our first session. I want to say that I have a personal connection for a really long history with Agilify. Not only have they been a really great supporter to the Shared Services Network, I know most of the team there from back when they were pre-commercialized, when they all came to the practitioner side of the house. So they grew up with practitioner roots, and I think you'll see that is evident in their discussion and their delivery. They have brought that knowledge to the audiences in webinars, workshops, and so many other things, co-authored white papers. And one thing you're going to hear about that we're all especially proud of is what we refer to as our H1 and H2 Intelligent Automation Global Market Reports. They were a significant partner with us on that. They're going to highlight some of that information in there, and hopefully you'll have a chance to look at that information as well. This is a very interactive session. We're starting the whole week out with the fact that we're going to start blending your questions in right out of the get-go. So don't feel like you have to wait till the very end. We're going to take a poll question quick and early to get you involved, and then keep breaking back and forth to answer your questions. It's meant to be that type of interactive discussion. So get your fingers on the keyboards quickly, and without further ado, I will turn this over to the Agilify CTO, Scott Peeble, who will also introduce Peter Tarrant, who is the automation product architect. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the digital stage, and over to you, Scott.
Thanks, Rochelle, and thanks everyone for joining. Good morning, good afternoon to wherever you are. And again, we really love to make this a highly interactive session, so please use that Q&A feature. The content will really depend on the information that you put in. So just real quick, I'd like to just introduce myself. So I'm CTO here at Agilify, and I've been in the intelligent automation space for more than 5 years, running the COE and also finding process opportunities, as Rochelle had mentioned before we were commercialized. And now my main focus is really helping clients like yourself finding value in their overall automation program. So Peter, if you'd like to just take a second and introduce yourself too.
Sure, my name is Peter Tarrant. I also started on the practitioner side and have done pretty much everything from developer to operations, and then all the way through to analysis, analytics, and now looking to make sure that our value that we're bringing, our services and product that we're putting out to clients matches what the market needs today as a product architect. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So we'll just jump right into, I know that we've got a poll question, Rochelle, if you would like to kind of run that one. But really what we're looking for is where are you measuring the impact of your automation for your business today? We know that there's a lot of different ways that organizations are wanting to find, but we know that in the early days of your overall journey, you're really looking for low-hanging fruits. You're looking for hours saved. You're really looking to say, well, okay, what's my overall volumes, and how do I get the return on investment? So if you can just take a second here and answer this question. We know that during your overall program, as Rochelle had mentioned, in the Global Intelligent Automation Market Report, H2, we laid out 13 stall points that you would likely be interacting or coming in contact with, whether that was the need for a design authority role, an effective execution, maybe it's underestimating the true benefits of the overall automation program, lacking automation strategy. We know that there were quite a few things that kind of kept individuals from really getting the most out of it, but we're really interested to find how else are you measuring, or is you really just measuring in your automation program and the hours saved? So I guess that was give you an opportunity to answer that question. But I think when we really start shifting into this next conversation around aligning your intelligent automation program with your business objectives, we find that there's likely a bigger stall point. We found that it's great that your automation program is finding value at the automation or the individual automation, but maybe the bigger stall point is are those automations really being tied back to the bottom line benefits? And I know that, Peter, we had some hours saved in the early stages, but to really grow, there's little visibility to the bottom line and the business benefits and those objectives. And we've uncovered quite a few, I think, and some of the examples in our latest Total Automation white paper. But if you could please, let's just walk through a couple of those examples of what we found to really kick off kind of the discussion and the dialogues as we move forward.
Yeah, I think so much of the conversation for the past couple of years has been anything outside of hours saved is fluff or not measurable, or it's hard to understand, hard to find. And really, as you move away from just automating tasks and you get to automating entire end-to-end processes and things along those lines, what you find is the automation actually has an impact on your overall business metrics. And what we went through the exercise with the white paper of actually identifying some of those And we categorize them into 5 broad categories. And one of them, the first one being the quality effect, what we're calling the quality effect, is really understanding the impact of error reduction, right? So your task that you're doing that you've automated, maybe it's refining or doing the work that used to be done at a more accurate rate. What does that mean for a department within itself? Do you do your own corrections? Do other people within the team do self-checks and peer reviews and things along those lines that won't need to be done anymore, aside from just doing the task, right? Or is there a downstream department, let's say a procurement team that doesn't have to manually do a bunch of work, but is now being done more accurately? Is a finance team down the road in the payables department having to do less work, right? Is now outside of the task, you actually have another task that you have to go measure, and you have to find it and start measuring the impact that an automation had on that task, right? This is the hard dollar. It's actually just kind of more hours saved, if you will, but it's something that's outside of the individual task. So you just broaden your aperture a little bit and look further. So that's a really quick summary of the quality. How are you measuring the impact of quality on your organization? Scott, do you have something to add there?
Yeah, and I think that if we tie back to the stall points where we talked about good practice, good process management. We talked about making sure that we understand the impacts, and we're working with those departments downstream, upstream, to make sure that the overall automation program isn't impacting on the day-to-day, or how it's going to impact on the day-to-day. But I think what you're actually bringing to light is not only the impacts, but how are you measuring those impacts and taking advantage of that, right? Not just notifying them and saying, hey, by the way, this automation is going to come in, it's how this is going to impact you. But hey, let's get some measurements around that, and let's start then bringing that value into the overall program itself. I think that's really key.
Right.
It's really awesome.
Yeah, and even, I mean, we're going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but probably worth it in the sense that, as you work with that department, perhaps that downstream department, you don't want your automation to just fill their pipeline, right, without having them to have the ability to deal with that work. That's where organizational benchmarks and things come into play, where your automation is doing great in your procurement team, but if your finance team can't handle the additional volume, then your organization really isn't saving any money because your throughput's the same, right? You've just created this huge bottleneck with a bunch of items just kind of sitting there. So maybe you actually need to work together with a downstream department to automate both tasks, right? So that's something that we talk about a little bit more in some other areas, but I'd love to move on to the next kind of category that we talked about in our white paper. It's this audit and compliance satisfaction, and understanding the impact of audit and compliance within your automation, right? So what automation enables you to do is have results and logs where you can basically just signal out exceptions and do 100% audit on things that went wrong within your process, where you don't have to have a sample audit, somebody coming in and do a bunch of work to uncover these exceptions and write a bunch of custom queries and whatever it might be. So is there any impact on your annual audit budget? And then from a compliance standpoint, you can automate controls where you have perhaps automatic forwarding, or maybe even automatic review with specific business rules. And even as we get further and further along in technology, some machine learning trends and some automatic controls there. So how do you measure the audit and compliance impact that you have? Are you looking at those areas and saying, hey, this is what pre-automation state was, our budget was this, here's the impact at the end of the year that it had. So not just looking at an immediate saving, but say we need to look at this number at the end of the year, at the end of the fiscal year, to see a difference, and include that into the automation impact. Right. So another category that we looked at was scalability, and understanding the impact of automation on how you can scale. Do you handle increased volume? If something you see a spike for whatever reason, in this day and age, you might have a spike in back orders, right? Can your automation actually help you handle that so your people can still work, and instead of having to handle a bunch of overflow and now spending their entire day tracking back orders of supplies or whatever you may need, is the automation just throw some additional licenses at it, and you can handle the increased volume without any disruption to your business. or even just workforce flexibility. Again, right? It's hard to hire contingent workers in a time like this to handle something like that. So if your automation is there, you can just throw another additional license or additional 5 licenses, some more VMs at it. How are you measuring the impact of scalability upon your business? Perhaps it was that this is how much we would have lost in this time frame because we would have had to hire a contingent worker or 5 contingent workers and so on. So definitely another area to look at. Customer experience is another one. Understanding the impact of automation on your customers. This is a tricky one because it can be good or bad, right? If you automate the wrong way, your clients can have a negative impact on your customer experience. But perhaps automation has decreased your time to resolution. And what impact does that have on your customer service? Additional touches perhaps by your customer service agents. Perhaps more brand loyalty or stickiness that a customer has based on a number of positive experiences that have stacked, right? All of those kind of customer metrics that you're most likely, if you're a customer-focused organization, you're absolutely keyed in on those measurements. So those are things that you're already capturing, and a department, perhaps a CX team or a product marketing team or something along those lines is capturing. Are you dialed in to say, hey, we're introducing an automation. This CX team, we would like you to see if there's an impact here and measure a delta, right? Along with an automation release, not just waiting till the end of the year to say, hey, this changed. Does anybody have any idea why? Oh, well, we did release an automation, but then at that point you've already lost because there maybe there's 4 or 5 different things that could have impacted during that fiscal year. And now you can't attribute your impact solely to automation, and you don't know how much it was. If you have a measured approach to it and understand and plan it out, you can put a more definitive value to that. So the last area that we looked at was empowering impact. So basically what this is understanding the impact of automation on your own workforce. Are you keeping your workforce more engaged or happy because they don't have to do tasks that they hate? But even more than that, that was a pretty early sell around automation. We used to say take the machine out of the human. But there's even a greater thing on employee performance. Let's say an example of a salesperson. Let's say just kind of throwing that out there to say they don't have to spend as much time doing manual entry on their CRM. So now they have more time to make more calls, and maybe they generate more leads. Can you attribute that lead generation increase to automation, right? What value is that to your business? Those types of impacts have value. They are measured, right? A lead generation for a sales team, a sales manager is measuring that, obviously. So can you go again, plan out the deployment and rollout to say this automation rolled out here. Let's check to see between this time and this time what the impact was on this particular metric, and really looking at it in the sense of before release of an automation, as you're planning this, and even maybe as you're prioritizing your pipeline, to be able to say, here are the impacts that it's going to have on the organization. We're going to plan on measuring them at this cadence or at this rate in this way, and you can actually capture the differences and deltas in your organization in the metrics that you're already capturing. They're business metrics that in any of these areas a company is already looking at. So being able to identify these timeframes and plan out the metrics is very, very important. And again, these are hard dollars, right? These are metrics. These are actual measures. There's calculations. There's industry best practices on how these things are measured. These are definite things that we just have to look at. You just have to shift your focus to them. So that was the focus of our white paper. And I think, Scott, we've got some poll questions here. If you want to kind of go to those and we can kind of talk and start fielding some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, as you're talking through it, and I know that there's, this COVID-19 is kind of top of mind for everybody. And I think that the focus within your organization right now is viability, right? Staying profitable, right? And if there's a time in our corporate lives that our focus is now on, right, staying healthy, those would be those metrics, right, that are going to be important to our business. And those are the metrics that we need to start looking at. How does the automation program start impacting those metrics, right? You're saying that we're already measuring those because we already know that those are the key things that we need to stay to make us healthy. So what are we doing to really tie those, the automations back to those metrics itself? Yeah, so that's really great. So let's move over to the poll question. And it looks like 87% are just measuring on hours saved, and
we did say click all that apply, so it's not necessarily just.
Apply, correct. Yep.
Right.
That's a good point. Yeah. So it looks like ability to scale with lower cost is being measured at 46%, which is good, and employee churn. So it looks like everything is, at least in some capacities being looked at, which is really awesome. Which is, I think, maybe contributing to individuals being able to then scale the automation programs throughout their organization. So, this is great. Thank you for the feedback there through the poll, and we'll enter into the questions and answers section. So it looks like we do have a question out there. Can you give some examples and tips of measuring risk avoidance? Peter, in the white paper, you actually had one, right?
We were looking at some in realm of compliance, right? It kind of falls into, although this is actually, it was a hotly debated topic amongst ourselves, right? It's everything is around, every category is around cost savings, increased production, or avoiding risk, right? So risk avoidance we kind of concluded it's not its own separate category. It kind of lives in all of the categories because there's risk and risk avoidance in all of them. But there's, compliance is generally organizationally how you reduce risk. And so again, that idea of how are you as an organization doing that? And usually that's some sort of manual control, some sort of perhaps automate or a report that you regularly review that takes a long time to do, and maybe you automate that, right? You can actually automate some of those things as well, those reports or those metrics gathering, and even the communication and dissemination of those reports. We were looking at a use case of basically physician risk. We were helping a client look at physician risk factors and being able to predict based on the people that perhaps in an OR and the location that it's at and the timing and all these kind of things, and utilizing even a machine learning algorithm to help predict some of these things. So risk avoidance is such a huge category, but really you want to look at how are you doing it now and how can I make it better? And then obviously, if you have if you get fined for compliance issues, that's a way of organizations or governing bodies, punishing you lacking risk avoidance, right? So making sure that you have automations in place to help review and avoid those types of penalties is obviously there. Even in terms of, if you look at financial risk in terms of maybe collections, right? You're avoiding your DSO being out too long, or your aged invoices, which is a financial risk in terms of the fact of the interest that you have to pay, right? So it's a really broad category. It's hard to you really just have to look at there's already tactics that you're doing, and how do you assist and automate and help those is really how you would measure or make an impact on risk avoidance with automation, in my mind.
Yeah, and I think the other way that we've helped a client was around, I think it was their SOC review, right? And the whole point of SOC is risk avoidance, right? And making sure that you have all the processes in place and then the attestation around that, and being able to take automations that fit within the not only the task itself, but also in the act of the attestation, and putting automations for that, which then actually makes you more efficient in how you are running, right, and proving that you are actually compliant within that, which then overall reduces your risk even further. So that would be another example. So another question here has now come in. Peter, this is a good one. So can you discuss new customer experience metrics you or your clients have put in place and correlating them to how automation is impacting it?
New CX metrics as opposed to an existing one, like a time to resolution, perhaps? I mean, you obviously, things like your percentage of first call resolutions, things along those lines, your time to resolution of a case, those are fairly well known in terms of ITSM and customer service management. But if we're talking about new, perhaps it's something along the lines of if you enable automation to change your customer experience in a digital way, in the sense of again, this is going to some of the new tools that are available out there, leveraging machine learning and being able to get and gather this data and present it to a person, so that when a person actually gets on the phone, when a call center person answers the phone, they already know what the person is likely calling about without any series of prompts, right? So we're not talking about having a 50 question prompt to say, hey, do you need this? Do you need this? Do you need this? More along the lines of, let's say from again, medical perspective, this person just had a visit that concluded. And this call is now received 2 weeks within that window. Perhaps it's actually time to schedule your next appointment. So the call center person answers and say, hello, so-and-so, I see that you had an appointment 2 weeks ago. Are you here to schedule your next appointment? Right?
Right.
And blowing the mind of that person on the phone by having just given your, maybe a customer ID or something along those lines, a fairly simple prompt, to be able to predict what that person is going to be calling about. Those are where new metrics come into place, right? That's where new automations and new tools allow you to completely blow the current metrics of CX out of the water, where you can try to see and measure the impact of proactively meeting customer needs, right? And maybe it's survey results, and you just start needing to ask questions about how often, we were able to anticipate your needs. How often we were able to make a proactive communication to say, send an email to say, hey, do you need to do this? Do you need to do that? And what impact that has on customer retention and customer experience. That's, I think, really, really, really where we're getting is those are the types of metrics outside of all the traditional things where we need to get to as the technology enables it.
Yeah, which then extends it outside of just the net promoter scores, right? Or your customer stats, right? That's where I think the real value really starts landing. But it's not to say that those aren't really still important, the net promoter scores, but having an understanding of what and where you were currently. And then as you start putting in some of these customer experience automations, really, tying that back to, and then do you have an overall understanding of the value of your net promoter score, or how you're measuring that and saying, hey, if I could just make this go 1 percentage point, 2 percentage point, what does that mean to my overall company? And is there a value to that? And and because you're now measuring that as automations are going in, and as you're seeing that, now you can attribute those values to the increase in those scores itself. So that's great. So all right, so we've got lots of questions coming in. So thank you. Please keeping them coming in. Again, the content of this is really up to you guys as you are asking for some questions. So here's another one that just came in, Peter. So say, how are you measuring the employee morale benefit of taking unnecessary tasks off their desks?
I think there's a lot of dependency there in the sense that did you have a high turnover rate in your department? Do you have people that are very skilled that are leaving perhaps for other departments? It's that type of move, even if it's a lateral move, especially perhaps if it's a lateral move, are indicative of employee satisfaction within a team or department. That idea of this isn't what I was hired to do. Even understanding from an associate or employee experience perspective, from a direct report, having that be a touch point of understanding this is what this is what I was hired, this was my perception, and this is the reality, and understanding those. So maybe your organization has some of those metrics and some reporting and some a trellis, or if you will, to capture that information, but perhaps you don't, and it's worth doing. I think that metric around lateral move is probably one of the more indicative ones, because it's not somebody getting promoted because of ability or merit. It's somebody that's taking another job that's the same level because they're not happy, right? So I think that would be in that initial focus. But there's lots of different ways, and I think as we get more and more focused on employee experience, there's more and more metrics and studies around how to measure and how to manage and how to understand the pulse of your team, where those methods will definitely yield your results, even if it's just anecdotal, right? And your direct reports or your +1 meetings and so on and so forth, the tenor and tone of those things, and improving that. But I think, when you look at turnover and retention, lateral move, that's probably what you're going to look at ultimately.
Yeah, and depending on the overall maturity of the organization itself, and do you do employee benchmarking? Do you do some kind of employee engagement scoring within your organization? Again, these are things that most individuals do, or most organizations do. So being able to then have an understanding of where engagement is before you do the automations, and then seeing, is your engagement scores changing? Are your employees, right? I mean, that's what we're really talking about here is morale or employee engagement. It's what we're really trying to tie to. So if you have the abilities to roll things out and really bring employee engagement into the automation program itself, you're going to see your morale increase, and that would show up within, I think, it should show up within those scores. So another question for us. So for the audit measures, have you found internal or external auditors indicating the digital and audit trail makes it easier to review controls, and audit fees are lowered as a result? So I'd take this one. I think yes, absolutely. So some of the work that we've done within a client that was tied, automations that were tied directly to the overall program itself from an audit perspective, they were able to get to the results that they needed. Right, there was in one particular attestation that I'm thinking of. There was a sample size poll that they needed to do for invoices, for journal entries. And in this case, we had automations that were actually creating all of those journal entries, and we actually removed the need for that actual control altogether, because it was an automation that was being put in place. So when you start pulling all of these automations kind of together, the overall audit and the need for the long weeks and weeks and weeks of audits coming in and asking for this data pull or this data pull, or another one that I just thought of was the data pull itself. So before, when they said, hey, we need to be able to see, the last bit of transactions, that was always labor intensive for individuals to go and actually pull all of the necessary documentation to show that we're actually compliant. When you have an automation that's in place that does that automatically, you would see the reduction in the overall needs to be able to pull those together. Peter, you have any other thoughts on that?
I think, it really is around the finding the data and understanding your sample, and all of that is just not necessary anymore. You have the report, you have the output right there, and your investigation is much shorter that way. So it's in one sense it's fairly obvious, and it's, I think there's a move even within those audit organizations to be able to shift to this type of model, because a lot of these organizations, if you will, the big four, they're consuming automations themselves. They understand the impact and how it is that they audit their own organization, and being able to provide that externally. It's very they're preparing. If you look at what they're doing, they're preparing for this shift in the market. So they absolutely see it because they know that they need to be able to do this business in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to even the H2 report that we talked about and the stall points. There was one that was keeping audit out of the loop. And of course, that's not keep them out of the loop. That is don't keep them out of the loop. And the earlier that you can bring your internal and or external auditing team in to really explain through, what are the impacts and what are you doing and what do you hope to achieve, you can have them right alongside and saying, hey, if you just did this, now we can start actually removing the needs for or the change for this, or how do we change the attestation to be this instead of this, which will really speed things up. So again, I think the whole point here is don't do it in a silo. You get your auditors involved early to really start helping to then reduce your overall spend. And I think at the end of the day, spend is really what we're talking about here because it is so costly within your overall audit process. So. Another question came in. Can you touch base on the keys to identify and process automation candidates?
Yeah, I think, whenever you're looking at your potential pipeline, at the beginning of the day, we were really focused on volume and the amount of transactions that are going to be pushed through in automation and how many people are doing it and all of those types of metrics, which are still important, absolutely, because that will drive most of your value. But I think now you really need to look at more of the holistic view of that core business value metric that you really want to impact. What are your organization's imperatives, right? Is it driving down costs in this area? Is it decreasing DSO across the board, depending on, if you're a distributor or a reseller of some sort? Is it identifying that metric, finding what key business processes support that metric, and filling your pipeline with not just high volume transactions that happen across your organization, but really focusing on the transactions that are bottlenecks within that particular process. So really starting with the organizational imperative or goal or metric that the C-suite is focused on, or your senior director or your director is focused on, and saying, this is my overall business metric. Finding and filling your pipeline with automations that impact that are really how you want to identify your process automation candidates today.
Yeah, and I think that's critical in the investments that's needed within this RPA and the RDA space is so low. But when you really start wanting to grow and expand and starting getting into more ML, more cognitive type technologies, now we're starting to talk about more of an investment. Now we're starting to talk about, how do you tie back the conversations to what you really want to achieve to get into a full digital transformation, and going back to your CFO or your COO saying, okay, now I need more money, and now you got to be able to justify why it is that we need even more money on top of what you've already spent. And if you can't communicate back to the business objectives itself and saying, hey, here's the bottom line as an organization, here's what we're trying to tackle, and here's the impacts that we'll get because of the investments that we're not just making within the RPA space or the RDA space, then how do we get into that cognitive, the next levels, right? And this hope for what I say, air quotes, artificial intelligence.
Yeah, and I think it's indicative that even at the beginning, I think the beginning of this year, the end of last year, there was still 52% of organizations that hadn't scaled beyond 10 bots, according to, I think it was Forrester that published that metric, which means it's probably an automation program probably stayed in a single function, right? Whether it was finance or procurement, and we see that a lot. So it was this almost play thing where you got this tool and you automated some things, but getting to that next level of that executive investment of scaling to the rest of the organization, because this focus was so narrow, it never got to that level of understanding what the key organizational imperative was, right? So taking it, using the term again, widening the aperture. Automation is not a single department, single silo thing, right? It is now a capable and proven technology that's increasing its not productivity, its breadth of things that it can do almost on a daily basis now. So it's time to look at it as an organizational tool of digital transformation, right? So really making sure that the way you identify your candidates matches that strategy, that digital transformation strategy around process improvement and bottom line metrics for your entire organization and organizational goals is how we absolutely have to be approaching it now, today, because the capabilities are so far beyond just automating a single task that's being done today.
It really is. So I guess we've got 5 minutes left. So let's see. Let's go back to another question here. So Peter, can you provide examples of how or what automations have been done without the main measure being hours saved?
I think that anything that we've done, Scott, you've already mentioned it, around audit and control, right? It's not just about hours saved there. A lot of things around customer service, right, are, whether it's impacting the back end kind of management of tickets and things along those lines, the implementation of perhaps a chat bot, and the impact that has on customer service. Those types of things, especially when it comes to client-facing automations or client-supporting automations, the hard dollars get really fuzzy, right? So those are really strong candidates, if you will, for other metrics, because your hours saved, again, it might not have really any impact on your customer retention, right? You can spend so much time on the phone and it might not do anything, right? So, or the fact that, people respond negatively to automation that doesn't meet their needs, or is too visible, or is too impersonal, right? So your hours saved might actually not matter at all because you have a negative impact on the client base. So anything facing customers where a customer directly impacts an automation or an output of an automation, you really, really want to look at something other than just this kind of hours saved idea.
Yeah, good. All right, so I think we got time for just one last question. So what would we say to your executive team to help them sell them on the concept of Total Automation Program U? Last question.
Well, maybe I should ask you that question, Scott, Mr. Chief Technology Officer.
Yeah, so I think that it really comes down to tying back to the business objectives, right? We keep talking about it. Right? This whole segment has been about this exact same thing, which is here's the understanding of what the overall business objectives are, right? And the metrics that are tied back to how that value is going to be measured. Finding ways to be able to have those automations tied back to that to show the overall value. I think that's the key piece that I think, I know that I've seen it in multiple organizations as this question around, hey, I've got a COE in place, but I'm not really getting the visibility that I need. I've got an executive sponsor who really likes what I'm doing, and every time that we try to get visibility across the whole organization, it always comes back to the same old thing. Yeah, that's nice that you have this going on, but it's not necessarily something that we really want to invest in at this time, and it's because we're not hitting at the heartstring of what's really important within the business itself, and what is the most important thing in the business. And again, I think COVID-19 is bringing visibility to that as we speak because of what we talked about, which is the viability.
Yeah, if you come to your CFO, if you go to your CFO and say, hey, I have this plan to decrease our DSO by 2 days, there's no way he's not going to listen, right? Like, right. Exactly. DSO is so important if you're in kind of that distribution business, right? Especially, and that's the primary method of cash flow, right? It's speaking that right language, that organization level, C-level language of what are you doing to my bottom line? What are you doing to increase my cash flow? What are you doing to all these things that CEOs, CFOs, COOs value, we have to speak on that level, because hours saved doesn't mean anything to them. Yeah. Decreasing DSO by 2 days does, right?
Yeah.
So it's changing that narrative from that department level. I'm really focused on making my throughput better of this one thing, but taking that and transforming that to the actual organizational impact. Okay, now we've decreased the number of, if you're in procurement, the number of credit holds that we get on is decreased by 50%. Oh, well, that is now a metric that a C-level person can get behind, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, this has really been great. Thanks, Peter. Thanks everyone for listening and for the great engagement as always. Don't forget to hit the digital gift bag, where you'll find some really great content from Agilify. If you have any follow-up questions or would like to learn more, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at the contact page on agilifyautomation.com for more information. So thanks, Rochelle, for the opportunity again, and over to you.
All right. Thank you both, Scott and Peter. A special thank you to our entire audience, those listening live and those listening to the pre-recordings. As Scott did mention, in that digital gift bag in your resource center, we have lots of things for you. The H2 report that he made multiple references to is located there. And when we were talking about the white paper and all of this information that was downloaded, that is the first thing in your resource center. So you can either download it now, or at the end of the week when you get the access to the recordings, you'll also be able to go into the recording and take all those resources with you. You'll find them very useful wherever you are on your automation journey. I can assure you of that. On that note, I wanted to share that the next session coming up today is going to be just in 15 minutes. We're going to talk about how Northwestern Medical uses the supplier portal to drive compliance, reduce fraud, and improve working capital. We had a little introduction here about managing cash. We're going to continue on that. So please hit the green arrow button to go on to the next session, and we'll see you back here in just 14 minutes now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Big thank you to the entire Agilify team for starting us off today and really setting the tone for the entire week. And this now concludes this webinar session. See you soon.